All good to go.
Good to go. Thank you. All right, we're going to call to order the budget meeting for tonight, Tuesday, February 8th, 2022. We have regrets from Councillor Hebb, Councillor Rhino, and the warden, who are currently unavailable dealing with water issues and commitments. So moving on, we have the continuation of the budget. Over to the Finance Director, Sue.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't know if you want to post the agenda for this evening, Shirley, or do you want me to share it?
I had it shared. Can you see it now? It's on screen now.
There, it's on there now.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I'm just reading here. Okay. So we're continuing on this evening with the budget presentation, and the first item up tonight is Parks, Rec and Culture. They're going to continue on with 3 reports that were deferred. 2 of them were deferred from the Executive Committee on January 18th, and they do impact the budget. And then there's another one that the Director of Parks, Rec and Culture will provide more information on winter maintenance for paved paths. So I will turn it over to Catherine, I believe, is going to be presenting the first. Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you. The first the first report I'm going to share tonight is the general government grant for 2022-2023. So this report just provides an overview of the general government grants program. The Staff Grants Review Committee has reviewed this and are bringing it forward for direction on inclusion in the general government grant budget for 2022-2023. In the table here, you can see the list of organizations that we provide support to annually and the corresponding amount beside their organization name. You will also note that there is a contingency available of $2,000. So if any new grant requests come in over the year, we will bring these to council for you to approve when they are received. So just scroll down. So background, the purpose of the general government grants policy is to provide funding to programs and nonprofits that meet the eligibility of this program. And as per the municipal grant program policy, the general government grant requires a motion of council to approve the budgeted general government grant recipients before the monies are released. And then after they're approved, in order to have the money actually sent to them, they need to request they have to send it back to us as a request, a letter to the CAO, their financial statements, and their operating budget. In the discussion, we have an overview of the organizations that we provide support to through this program. Now in total, there are 12, when you include the 5 East Hants food banks we provide assistance to through this grant over the year. I'll let you guys, if you have any questions about any of the organizations, don't hesitate to ask, but you guys have all seen these organizations before. Just to review, the East Hants food banks, the 5 that we support include the Caring and Sharing Food Bank, Hants North Food Bank, Indian Brook Food Bank, Shumalak Food Bank, and Uniacke Wish Givers. And this past year, we also included the Kids Action Program, their Christmas program, as part of this $1,000 donation. Earlier, I noted that we asked the organizations included in this grant to provide us with a letter of request to CAO, their financial statements. For the food banks, we do not require that since it is a donation to their operations. I already touched on the contingency, but if there is any other request for a general government grant throughout the year, we will bring it to council for your approval. The alternatives, you can identify alternate funding amounts for the general government grant recipients. And that's the overview of the general government grant program. So I'm gonna pass it. The recommended motion is here. you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you so much, Catherine. First up to speak is the Deputy Warden.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just through the staff, is there any overlap between the Hants County Christmas Angel Society and the Kids Action Program, since they're both Christmas programs?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Not that I'm aware of. However, the Kids Action Program is mainly based in the Kennecook area, and the Hants County Christmas Angel Society, they're closer to the borders with West Hants. So I'm not sure of any overlap, but if you want me to look into that, I can.
Any idea, just a follow-up of how many East Hants residents are serviced by the Hants County Christmas Angel Society?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I did actually ask this past year, and I believe 32 families received support.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Good news. Thanks.
Yeah.
That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Is there any other conversation on the presentation? Councillor Green.
I move the recommended motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councillor Knockwood, you had your hand up before the motion was made. Were you? You're on mute.
Yeah, I was gonna do the motion.
Okay, too easy then. All right, we have a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor, please raise your hands.
Aye.
Ayes. Motion is passed unanimously. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you. I'll bring up my next report. You guys all see that?
Yeah, you're good.
Wonderful. So the next and final report from me this evening is the Bylaw F4007, an amendment to the Bylaw 400, our tax exemption bylaw. This is actually the first year it's lived within the Parks, Recreation and Culture department. However, the process is the exact same as it's been every year. And there shouldn't be, it's pretty straightforward. So this year, staff have completed their annual review of all the properties currently receiving tax exemption under Bylaw F400, the tax exemption bylaw. As a result, staff are recommending to remove 3 properties from Schedule A as they no longer qualify for tax exemption. Also, during the annual review, a housekeeping item was noted, and staff are recommending updating the name of property number 01360884 from the East Knoll Community Club to read the East Knoll Heritage Schoolhouse Society. We'll get into the details below, but there is no loss of tax revenue from this Bylaw F400 review. The 3 properties that are being recommended to be removed from Schedule A are now owned by the Municipality of East Hants. This information has been relayed to finance and has been incorporated into the draft 2022-2023 budget. Just scroll down to the background. So we enacted Bylaw F400 as a bylaw that exempts nonprofits and charitable organizations from paying property tax. A review of properties receiving tax exemption under the bylaw is completed annually to ensure organizations continue to meet their eligibility criteria. Amendments to the bylaw are recommended based on findings during this annual review. So during the review, property number 7857012 and property number 7857020 were formerly owned by the East Hants Arena Association. In July of 2021, the Municipality of East Hants purchased the East Hants Sportsplex property, and so the property is now to be removed from Schedule A of Bylaw F400. The other property to be removed, we're recommending to be removed, is property 0339645, previously was in the ownership of the trustees of Clarksville Community Hall. In December, the property was transferred to the municipality of East Hants. And the other update is something I mentioned earlier with the changing of the name. So property 1360884, the property owners updated their registered name on the registry of joint stocks. So in order to keep Bylaw F400 and Schedule A up to date and current, we're recommending changing the name to their current name, which is the East Knoll Heritage Schoolhouse Society.
Thank
That's
you, Catherine.
Just review. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Deputy Warden Mitchell, you have a question?
Yes, just a quick question on the first two properties of the East Hants Arena Association. Can you tell me what two properties they are? Is one the dome and one the ice surfaces, or
Like sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, the property like geographically? I think there are two parcels of land that were owned by them that we now own.
oh, okay. So we're just amalgamating the two properties.
They're identified by separate property IDs, but there's two properties that are being held by the Arena Association, and they're both going on the list under this motion.
Right.
They're being removed.
They're both coming off.
Or
the list.
removed. Yes, removed.
Okay. I'm just curious what physical properties they were. That's all.
Oh, okay. Sue?
Want me to, through the chair. So one of them actually does have the dome and the sportsplex, and then there's another small parcel of land adjacent to the sportsplex, and they both are under our ownership now, the municipalities, and so they're exempt now because they're municipal.
That clears up my concern.
Sure.
Thanks.
No problem. Next up is Councillor Tingley.
Yeah, through the chair. Norval, if you wanted to know what the two properties were, the one was the original property that was donated by Shaw to the sportsplex, and some years later they bought the front section for future parking, just a small section. It's not even in use yet, so that's what the second section was.
That does include the skateboard park.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, that's good to know.
All right. I see the warden has joined us. Welcome, warden. All right. So we have the conclusion there. And there is a recommended motion. Is there any discussion or correction? Is there anybody? Councillor Green.
I'll move the recommended motion.
I'll second the motion.
Moved by Councillor Green, seconded by the Deputy Warden. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion is passed unanimously. Thank you, Catherine, for your presentations tonight. Next up on the list, we have Winter Maintenance Pave Pass, and the Director of Parks and Recs, Elena, will present that.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see the report on the screen? I hope so. Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chair. So what I'm bringing forward tonight is winter maintenance to municipally owned paved active transportation pathways. Within the municipality, we have approximately 4,000 meters of municipally owned and managed active transportation pathways. Now, of those pathways, we have approximately 285 that are paved, and these act as an extension of the existing sidewalk, and they also provide connectivity between municipal and/or provincial assets. And it's really been brought to our attention from residents of the area, as well as through a motion of council, that the community does value year-round access of these paved active transportation routes. Okay, so we have a budget increase that in order to provide the winter maintenance specifically to the 285 meters of municipally owned paved AT pathways, and those are ones that are found at the end of Ashford Way, Cali Lane, and Tyler Street, would be $1,500. Our current draft budget does include these funds under the general tax rate. However, long-term, as the paved urban active transportation trails get expanded through development, the urban service rate could assume winter maintenance cost as they do for sidewalks. So it is recommended, or we are bringing to council and recommending that they approve the adoption of winter maintenance and the extension of sidewalk service standards to municipally owned and maintained paved active transportation pathways that fit the following criteria. And those criteria include that they're built to sidewalk standard and fully paved. They are at minimum 1.5 meters wide, are an extension of municipally owned and year-round maintained sidewalks or active transportation routes. They're within the urban service rate area and provide connectivity between municipal and or provincial assets. So I'm going to scroll down just to sort of further explain some of that. So in 2017, East Hants did develop a policy for winter clearing standards for roads and sidewalks, and that was drafted to replace previous standards. And under this policy, it covered the winter clearing for sidewalks specifically within the right of way, but it didn't actually apply to active transportation pathways that were within municipally owned open space areas outside of the right of way. And we do currently have snow clearing contracts for the sidewalks throughout the corridor area. And adding the recommended paved pathways to the existing contracts would be cost effective and fairly straightforward from an operations perspective. So as I mentioned above, we have 285 meters of paved pathways we're recommending. Of that, we're recommending 3 of 4. There is one additional paved pathway. So the 3 we're recommending are Ashford Way, one at Cali Lane, as well as Tyler Street. And I have a table below and some pictures that'll help sort of explain it. The Ashford Way is about 120 meters. It is paved, and it actually connects the municipal sidewalk or the end of the cul-de-sac with Highway 2. Cali Lane and Tyler Street, Cali Lane being 68 meters, Tyler Street being 35. They connect the municipal sidewalk to the back portion of the Elmsdale District School property. And Concord Way is 63 meters. It is paved, but we're not recommending it for winter maintenance because it actually connects municipal sidewalk to private church property versus a provincial and or municipal asset. So when it comes to service standards, we do, like I said, have the winter clearing standards for roads and sidewalks specifically within the right of way, but it doesn't apply the AT pathways. The 3 active transportation pathways that we are recommending for winter clearing are an extension of the existing municipal sidewalk. They were built at the same time and presumably to the same standard. So by extending the current policy and standards to include the 3 pathways, it's also further supported because those pathways are paved. They are 1.5 meters wide and they do connect municipal provincial infrastructure. So the first picture just shows Ashford Way, and the large building to the left is actually the Sportsplex. The red line actually shows where the pathway connects the end of Ashford Way to Highway 2. The next one down is Cali Lane, and this is where the sidewalk literally turns and is just an extension of sidewalk that goes into the back of the Elmsdale District School. Same for Tyler Street. Down at the bottom, actually at a 90 degree, is the Cali Lane portion, and the Tyler Street connection is indicated in red. And then the last map just shows Concord Way, and this AT pathway, it doesn't connect municipal to provincial infrastructure. It's really there for future connectivity should we ever have municipal land at that portion, but presently it would just connect to the private church property. So alternatives for council's consideration is that council could approve the adoption of the winter maintenance and extension of sidewalk service standards that fit the following criteria, as I've discussed before. Or alternatively, council could choose to just go with status quo, which is not maintain any pathways other than our sidewalks within the road right of way. So I'm going to go back up to the recommended motion. So the recommended motion to be considered at tonight's February 8th, 2022 budget meeting is move that Corporate and Residential Services Committee recommend the council give notice of intent to approve the extension of the sidewalk performance standards for plowing, de-icing, and snow removal found in the East Hants policy for winter clearing standard for roads and sidewalks to municipally owned paved active transportation pathways at Ashford Way, Cali Lane, and Tyler Street. And the second portion of that is providing winter maintenance to future municipally owned active transportation pathways that fit the following criteria: built to sidewalk standard and fully paved, minimum 1.5 meters wide, are an extension of municipally owned and year-round maintained sidewalks or AT routes within the urban service rate, and provide connectivity between municipal and or provincial assets.
Thank you so much.
There. Thank you.
First up to speak, Councillor Garden Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions, or one question in particular. If this were to be passed, when would the maintenance commence?
So we, through you, Mr. Chair, we have it in the budget, so it would not actually start until the following year. So it would actually be for next November, December, whenever the winter season starts.
Okay, thank you. And secondly, can you show me the one on top? Can you show me the screen with the aerial view of Tyler Street, of the Tyler Street walkway again?
Yeah, absolutely.
So is that in the new development area of Tyler Street?
Yes.
I'm just,
It is, yeah. So it's my understanding it is.
okay. Were those put
Sorry,
in
go ahead.
are those put in by developers?
In all, through you, Mr. Chair, in all reality, I believe they are, as the development goes in, they're an extension of the sidewalk that goes in with them. The municipality doesn't put them.
Through you,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, the paved pathways are typically part of their open space contribution
Okay.
for that development. So if you went up there now where all that dirt is, there's several townhouses and several houses being developed up there now, and that I assume would have been part of their open space contribution.
Okay, that's great. That's everything for me. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up to speak, the warden.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I apologize for being late. I hope to be able to stay. There's silence now. So anyway, now with these, I thought I heard you say it would be in the general rate, and then there was something about the urban service rate. So I'd just like a little bit of clarification, because I know the clearing of sidewalks is part of the urban service rate. So I guess I wouldn't see this as any different.
Go ahead, CAO.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So when we drafted the budget, it was assumed that these would be active transportation. It's $1,500 to clear them for a year. It's really an extension of that contract. So really what we're looking at long-term, so if you consider this a pilot of sorts, these are truly active transportation trails. They're little connector trails that are sort of through the woods or through property. What council is going to need to consider is when your active transportation trail becomes your sidewalk, then that would make more sense to have those cleared as sidewalks. But for this year, where the budget was already drafted and there was $1,500 in there, you know, we've had a lot of discussion as to what are these? Are they sidewalks? Are they active transportation paths? And the only reason at this point we're recommending that they're just in the urban service area, and we don't have paved ones anywhere else, but if we did, what would the question be? Would we snow clear them? The reason this is a simple solution is because we already have all of that contract in play. So if, for example, Mount Uniacke got some active transportation trails that were paved, then we would have to talk about snow clearing there and getting a contract in place and having somebody from the local area doing that work and doing it at the standards that we have in place. So Warren, the $1,500 right now for this year's in the general tax rate. And I would say as you develop out your trails further, you're going to want to have a conversation about whether that just eventually will just roll into sidewalks. When you have the developments that we anticipate, we'll have sidewalk on one side of the street and an active transportation trail on the other. It's not going to make sense to say, well, that's going to be cleared by the general tax rate, because really, for all intents and purposes, it's a sidewalk.
Quiet has ended, as you can probably hear. Yeah, I guess it's only $1,500. I'm probably okay for this year, but would like to have some discussion. I think we have to have discussion around that, because the reality is the folks who are using these as active transportation trails are the same folks who are using the sidewalks. Nobody's driving down to this area and just using those little active transportation trails. For all intents and purposes, in my view, they are extensions to the sidewalks. So, but as I said, it's a very small amount. I'm fine with it for this year. Would like to have a discussion before next year as to how we do these going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Yes, I agree. If you look at the new developments that we have, we've actually traded off one side of the road being a sidewalk and the other side being active transportation, where in previous developments, both sides were required to be sidewalks. So the idea of the trail being an extension of the sidewalk is something that should be looked at for future discussion. Next up on the list is a deputy warden.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. The area next to Ashford Way, is that public space, or can that be developed? If you go back to the picture.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I've scrolled down. So here's Ashford Way. Do you mean the forested area?
Yes, is that
The one
developable
side?
land, or is that the open space, parkland?
And to be honest, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not sure if
Okay.
if anyone else on
The
staff
director
is
of
aware.
planning is coming in here. Go
We're all
ahead, John.
jumping in now.
Sure, thank you. It's all that land is owned by transportation now as part of the right of way, so it can't be developed.
Okay. Okay, that's just a question. I thought maybe somebody would develop it. Thanks, John.
Is that it, deputy warden?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Councillor Tingley.
Yeah, through the chair, I was gonna just say that I agree with what Eleanor said. At least for the walkway that's in Lance there at Ashford, it's more an extension of the sidewalk, and it's only going to be mostly used by residents in the area to walk out of the subdivisions and down to the sidewalk on Highway number 2 and go for their walks or go to the Sportsplex or wherever they're going. But I'd be willing to make to the motion as it's presented there.
Okay, so we have the motion as presented has been moved. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Knockwood. Any discussion on the motion?
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor, as the motion presented, raise your hand and say aye. All those contrary? Motion has passed unanimously. And just for note, CAO will have to make that discussion about trails and sidewalks on a future committee day post-budget, I would imagine. Okay. Next, back to the Director of Finance and the capital budget for 2022-2023. Take it away, Sue.
You're muted, Sue.
Sorry about that. My husband was playing guitar in the background. I was trying not to. You missed the entertainment. He's done now. Thank you to the chair. I'm happy to be here this evening to begin the capital budget presentation. I'm expecting that we will be able to get through the presentation this evening. For councillors' benefit, lots of entertainment this evening. For councillors' benefit, this particular budget is over a 5-year, it's a 5-year plan. And it also acts as council's capital investment plan. And it's tied to the Canada Community Building Fund, CCBF, which was formerly known as the gas tax program. So council does need to have a 5-year plan in order to be eligible for the gas tax, formerly gas tax funding. So just a little bit of background before we get into the actual slides of the presentation this evening. As I said, it's a 5-year plan. There's projects in here for years 1 through to years 5. The majority of the projects that are that staff are seeking approval are in years 1 and 2. And then in years 3, 4, and 5, mostly they're for further study. And that just means for councillors' benefit that the projects in year 1 and 2 that we're seeking approval, it's for staff to be able to proceed to start to carry out these projects. In the future years, it's for planning and also to get council's initial approval to begin costing out and getting design work and so on and so forth to be able to be ready at the time that the project needs to take place. Or alternatively, sometimes we come back through the year, which you've seen. Jesse certainly has done that, where the project may be moved up or sometimes it's pushed back. But an example of that was the project in Shubenacadie for the wastewater treatment plant. We had that in the capital budget. We sought further funding. We were successful in obtaining that funding, so that particular project was moved forward a little bit. And so you'll see that in this capital budget, of course, but it is already one that council has seen and approved, the sources of funding and so on and so forth. There's projects in here that staff has already started, and it may run over more than 1 year. So you'll have seen it already, but it may carry forward into the next year. There are projects that are already well underway, but we've left them in the capital budget because they may not reach completion until next year. So we wanted to make sure that council saw those here this evening as well. If there's any projects in the document was posted last Friday, I believe it was, for councillors to review. If there's any projects within that document, I'm very open throughout this presentation for answering any questions or providing additional information. I won't go through all of the projects because councillors have seen many of them already. There's actually only 22 new projects added to this capital budget this year, but there are projects that we are seeking additional funding, or they've moved from further study over to approval sought. So the next slide sort of speaks to what I was saying. There's projects in prior years that will go beyond March of 2022. So they're in there. There's projects for further study in prior years that we're bringing forward to have approval sought. There's new projects that counts for council to approve to commence next year or in future years. And then there's several projects that are new and we're just seeking approval for further study. Throughout the capital budget document, you will see, and I'll show you some of the slides that will actually show the projects themselves, but you'll see we've talked about this last budget presentation, all the different sources of funding that are available. Many of them, you saw numerous discussions and presentations in regards to reserves. And Janice gave a great presentation last time on all the different reserves and what they're used for. I will go into that at a high level. I will speak to that again as we go through this, just for a refresher. There's operational funding. There's debentures, which is debt if we need to borrow, if we've exhausted other sources of funding, including external funding, then the final option is debenture. There are some projects in here that do show as using debt, and many of them have reserves or external funding. I will point out at this point that if there's any projects that don't show debt and we do need to borrow, we would need, staff and myself would need to come back to get council approval to borrow. We're not able to increase any debt after this budget is passed by council. So we've spoke prior meetings about the reserves. There's general capital reserves, and for councillors' benefit, the general capital reserves include gas tax, which you'll see throughout the budget document. It also includes any sale from lands, land lot sales that we have in reserves, and any other types of reserves, such as if we have a surplus from a tax sale, those go into your capital reserves as well. So that's what makes up because I do know there was a question about that last week when we presented. Then there's all kinds of special reserves, which we looked at. There's open space reserves, which we spoke about in regards to the last report, that come in and allow for certain projects. And there are projects in this document that use all of these reserves, including that. There's infrastructure reserves, and that's the reserves that we obtain when developers are beginning certain development projects and they want to hook into sewer water infrastructure. They pay fees on average for a household, a one dwelling unit. They're $3,000 for sewer infrastructure and $3,000 for water infrastructure. So those are captured. And then as we need to upgrade and provide additional capacity, that's where we normally would use those reserves. An example of that again would be the Shubenacadie wastewater treatment plant. We're using several, we're using a fair amount of reserves for that particular project to coincide with the external funding that we received. And it's outlined here. Staff do not have authority to increase any debenture amounts, so we would have to come back if we needed to do so. This is just a snapshot. Again, it tells you the amount of reserves at year end, March 31st, that we had on the books. And the obligatory includes the sewer, water, and open space. And then your water utility is your reserves that are depreciation reserves that we have to fund as per the Utility and Review Board. And then that's your capital amount, which includes what I just mentioned. And then there's a substantial amount of operating reserves. And many of those are special reserves set aside that council has for specific purposes. So this is a snapshot of one of the new capital projects that I'll go through just so you can be familiar for those that aren't. Each project has its own page. This is a finance one that I'm responsible for. It relates to streetlights. This is a repeat capital project that we bring forward every year. It's a new one each year. This is 22 for next year. This project number shows that it's brand new. All of the new capital projects in the document start with the 22 and then they're numbered. And so this shows this is for urban service rate streetlights. If we need to put in new streetlights in the urban corridor, this is a budget for that. And it's broken out by reserves, which we have special reserves to fund this, and also external, and that would be developers. If there's new streetlights that are implemented in a subdivision, the developers contribute to that. Each of the projects show the department that's responsible or owns the project. It also has a project manager. In this case, that's me. It gives the life expectancy of the asset. In this case, it's 20 years. There's asset classification. That's for us in our system, our asset management system. It gives you the amount of the capital project for the year. It's in, the line item is in approval sought. That means that we're looking tonight, staff are looking for this to be approved for us to be able to spend that money next year. It's under the 2022-2023 fiscal year. So that just gives you an understanding of each capital project, and there's additional information. I'll just flip over so you can see this. I'll just flip to page 31. This is the same project. There's also additional information on each page that gives a project summary to explain to councillors what exactly the project entails. Some great information so councils are informed of what's taking place. It also aligns to council's strategic plan. It gives objectives and deliverables. This particular one is aligned with your sustainable infrastructure. It also will, each project will tell you whether it's regulatory. Sometimes it is, and it'll say yes. And also if it's a water utility project. And it has been approved already by the UARB in the rate review. This will say yes. If it's not, it'll say no. So that just gives you a little understanding of each of the capital projects and what they look like. So for this year, what I will do is give a high-level review of all of the new projects. And if you have any questions, I certainly will answer anything. And we also have the directors here that are responsible for each of the capital projects, and they can share additional information if need be. So on the first slide here tonight, there's 22 new projects altogether. This shows 6 new ones. The first 2 are also projects that we have in the budget new each year, and they're just related to our council's business parks. We always include 30,000 for the Elmstone Business Park in Uniacke, 10,000 special reserves for specific to development when there's additional work that needs to be done when there's lot sales. So that is in the budget, every year. The next one is a land acquisition capital project, and council has already seen this. It's land that we are looking to purchase for economic and social infrastructure. So there is a specific capital project in the document. It's on page 25. The page numbers are here, and it also gives you the capital asset project number. The following one is not new. It's a project that council approved last year to do some lateral work in the Elmstone Business Park, but in this case, we've added it here as a true capital project in the budget because it came about last year throughout the year, and it was not in the capital budget document last year, but it has already been approved. But we are seeking an additional $4,500 over and above what council approved. It was $25,500 last year. A report was brought to council, and we need an additional $4,500, $30,000 to carry out that work for a lot sale. These 2 I mentioned earlier, I used as an example. There's 2 capital projects every year for street lights, one for the urban service rate and one in streets other, and we have those every year. The next slide shows various, the first 3 projects there, and I'll just make it a tiny bit bigger. Maybe that'll help. There's 3 new projects related to the Lloyd Matheson Center. There's one for eaves trough system on the old section of the Lloyd Matheson because it doesn't currently have it. The new one does, and we are experiencing some issues, especially right now with rain coming off the side of the roof and freezing, and it's a little bit of a hazard falling off the roof. So we have included that in the capital budget this year for that work, and it is coming from special reserves. We have a special reserve for the Lloyd Matheson that we've accumulated for projects such as this. There's also a project here to replace the LED street lights in the parking lot and also on the building. They're currently not LED, And we're proposing that we replace those for better efficiency and power. So that's in there as well for 20,000 coming from reserves. And then there's some work that I believe was mentioned last budget meeting. There's some work that needs to take place in the parking lot for some repairs. It's starting to age. The building itself is over 15 years now, so there's some work to be done, and it's 50,000, and it is also from special reserves. Councillors are also familiar with the next project, is the park revitalization for the Shubenacadie River Park. You've seen reports on that. We have applied for funding, external funding, and that project is contingent on that funding becoming approved and for us to be approved for it. So, and it looks hopeful that we will get that. So that project is in there, and there's also some reserve money coming in on that capital project for that as well. The next project is for parks and playgrounds. And that is also 100,000. It's for approval sought as well, but it's not in the coming year. It's a year out. So that will allow staff to start looking at that particular project. And if for some reason we were able to do it sooner, we could come back and discuss it with council and perhaps start doing it or do it in 2022, depending on the workload of staff. And there's also a tourism infrastructure project as well for 110,000, same, it's pushed out to 2023, also coming from special reserves. I'll just pause there in case anybody has any questions or comments.
Go ahead, Warden.
I was going to wait until the end, but I will quickly ask. Page 32, DAR line. So I have in the back of my memory that these graphs used to look a little different, but that entire amount was at one time moved to approved for further study. Am I understanding that $400,000 is still in approved for further study? It's just split up 100,000 per year?
So, sorry, which project? I guess I didn't catch
the
it.
AR line.
Right.
Page 32.
Page 32.
So through the chair, I can answer that. Yes, the 400,000 is still in approval sought for further study.
And what about the 100,000 that was previously approved? Refreshed my brain.
So well, we reported as, sorry, I don't have my video on. I hope that's okay. Sorry about that. So no, that has been approved, the 100,000, and we have it in the budget to be spent in 2023, but it won't be spent unless we get external funding of $50,000.
And what was that approved for?
It was a project. So can you explain that one, Kimberly?
Yeah, through you,
ahead,
Mr. Chairman, if you look at page 35, I think the 400,000 the warden's looking at is on page 35 for the actual acquisition. It's part of that number. The $100,000 values were intended to be cost matched improvements to the trail once council acquires it.
Okay, so then this project in this budget is being moved for the purchase of that asset to being approved and is no longer an approved for further study?
No, if you look on page 35, there's a project called various land acquisitions. The $400,000 amount in 22-23 under approved for further study is still in approved for further study. So nothing can happen on that trail until council makes a decision on what is happening on that trail.
Just anxious. He seems to know when I turn the mic on. So yeah, it's just that we haven't had the reports and that we're waiting to get around ownership and title and everything there. So
we're working through those now.
Okay. Any other questions for staff on what's been presented so far? Seeing none, carry on, Sue.
Okay, so the next capital project is mill and pave for White Road. And this was originally in the project that was done this year for the local roads in the corridor, but it was paused and taken out because there's so much work going on there. And we've added this as a new capital project. And the amount right now is $76,000. The thing about this particular project is it could end up being more. That's all we're aware of. That would just be the mill and pave. But if anything else were to be incorporated into this, there would be a new capital project that would come back and include whatever other items might be required, whether it be traffic lights or what have you. And there was discussion about that in a development. So we've just left that for just a straight mill and pave in this budget for next year. And it would be funding by debenture. The next capital projects, the three of them are under waste management. There's a loader garbage bucket that's very old and obsolete that needs replacement. And that's $30,000, and there's ample reserve, special reserves for that, for all three of these actually. The second project there is work that needs to be done, extensive capital work for the organics transfer station. There's been some damage to that facility, and council was aware of that. I believe Jesse brought a report forward regarding that. So that's now in your capital budget. And again, that's from reserves as well. And there was a report that came to council in regards to some issues about the septic system out at the Waste Management Center, and it cannot be repaired at this point. It needs to be replaced. So there's a capital budget in there of $20,000 also coming from reserves. So the next 4 capital projects are under wastewater, and there's various pump upgrades for the lift stations that are required. It's a substantial, large capital project. We're seeking approval sought for this amount, and for further study further out, another $21,772, and that's all coming from special reserves. There's also a Milford storage building that's in disrepair, and I&O is looking to replace the storage building. It's used for multiple purposes, for water, wastewater storage, inventory parts, and we're looking today for approval sought for $50,000, and then for further study, another $150,000. This would be for design, and $150,000 for construction. And that would be further out, and council would have that come back to them before any work was to take place, and special reserves and debenture for that. There's also a lift station upgrade required at Old Horn Settlement, and this budget is looking for approval sought for $50,000 to start that for design, and then another $425,000 further study for the actual project, and that also is special reserves and debenture. And there is a wastewater system access road required in Milford for I&O and the staff to actually get to certain areas that they are required. There isn't a road. It's very difficult to get to the equipment that they need to. So they've put in for further study, not for approval sought, $200,000. And right now that is debenture, but it's quite far out. So as that project comes forward to council, we'll look for other sources of revenue, such as reserves, special reserves at that time. And every year you'll see hydrants. We try to make sure that we have hydrants in the capital budget each year. And we are looking to have approval sought for $120,000 so that I&O staff are able to install hydrants as required, and another $180,000 for further study. That's out years 3 to 5. And we do have sufficient depreciation reserves for that project. And these both are under the East Hants Water Utility. So that's all of the new projects. And then we have projects that are already approved by council in the capital budget, but they either are moving into approval sought or we're looking to include additional funding. So the first one is a land acquisition. It's been on the books since 2010. We are looking to purchase a piece of property in the Elmsdale Business Park to expand. And council has seen this in the past, and there's been reports to council on this. And we are looking right this evening on this particular capital project, an additional $235,600 for approval sought to bring this project up to 1.7 million. And council has seen this before. We're just seeking the additional funds. And then there's an additional million further study far out in, I think, year 4 or 5 that we're looking for approval. And that would be debenture for a source of funding. And then under Parks and Rec and Culture, and I will speak now in regards to the trucks. There's a schedule to replace trucks, usually 4 to 5 years, depending on the usage and the mileage and so on. And some of the trucks actually move from one department to another and are able to be used for a few more years, kept on the books. Sometimes they can't, and we actually dispose of them. We sell them if possible, if we need to. And in this case, what we've found, staff are noticing through corporate services, they've done some research, they actually look after fleet management, that the trucks are now more expensive than what they used to be in the capital project budget. So many of the projects in this budget will show a slight increase for those that have already been approved, and those that have not been approved yet, you'll see that the truck ranges between 40,000 and 45,000. So in this case, if you see the truck for parks, council has already approved it, but we needed an additional $500. And it's all coming from special reserves. For the building maintenance technician that you see there, you can see these are from 2018, these particular projects. Again, that when we go to actually acquire this truck, we're going to need an additional $5,000 to purchase it. So we've added that into the capital budget for council consideration, and also from special reserves. And same thing with the truck replacement for the building inspection. It's an older capital project. We're looking to have approval sought for an additional $5,500 to bring it up to where we need special reserves as well. So those cover the trucks that are in that we need additional funds. And then you'll see the next project is for the Waste Management Center. It's a loader replacement. This is on a cycle, I think, every 5 years that they need to replace, 5 to 10 years. And this was added to the budget last year. And it was, I believe, approval for future study. And now we're looking to move that into approval sought for future years here for $313,000. And again, that's from special reserves as well. And the next slide, again, is more projects that are existing that are already approved by council, but we're either looking for approval sought for additional funds, or in future years, or for further study. And the first one there is the wastewater treatment plant, which council is familiar with. And Jesse and I know just brought a report to council to increase that particular budget. It was in the capital project at 5.5 million. It's now 7.7 million roughly. So we're seeking approval sought for the additional amount, which council's already seen, but now it's formalized in the capital budget. And we have external funding already in place for that. And we have special reserves, which are your obligatory reserves that we talked about. And the next project is wastewater collection upgrade in Lance. And this is also an older project from 2016. And now we're getting close to actually starting the project, and we're looking for approval for future years of 2 million. This is funding from gas tax as well as other reserves. And there's another truck replacement, same thing. We need an additional $500, so we're seeking that in this presentation here in the capital budget. And then the next 4 projects are all lift stations that are becoming older and need to be upgraded. And they're listed there: Barney's Brook, Highway 277, Industrial Way, and the Medical Center. And 2 of them I know is looking to replace or upgrade in the near future. So we're looking for approval sought. And 2 of them we're just looking for approval for further study. The amounts have increased. The lift station upgrades are substantially more than what was originally in the budget back in 2010. So that's there is for councillors' consideration as well. Another truck. This is a truck that was in the capital budget last year. It was in for further study at that time, and now we are moving it and looking for council's approval to consider purchasing it. And it is in at the 45,000, and it's coming from special reserves. And the last 2 projects on this slide are for the water utility again. And Jesse and I know did bring forward a report in regards to this recently. It's the Enfield Water Treatment Plant capacity upgrade, which was in the budget last year. It's been in there for 2 years. And we are looking for an additional 900,000 to add to that capital budget to bring it to 2.2 million. And it is being funded from depreciation reserves or other reserves, or that's one that Jesse sought approval to go out to look for additional external funding. So if we're successful, then we would not have to use as many of the reserves that are in the capital project right now as listed. Another truck, which we talked about, we need an additional 5,000 to bring it up to the cost that we need in order to purchase it. And this particular truck is for the water utility, and it's coming from capital out of revenue. And that is takes
Sue,
us to the end of going through any of the capital projects that we plan to bring forward. Of course, there's 102 pages in the document, but go ahead. I'll take any questions.
yes, first up with questions is Councillor Musa.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for information, can you go back to the previous slide, please?
Sure. Oops. There we go.
Yeah, I see 2 of those projects are funded from the gas tax. Are we not collecting, or because of the Shubenacadie wastewater that came earlier than usual? So the wastewater is collecting enough money to do all the upgrades, or just to lower the rates or something? I don't know if you understand my question, but.
So I think I do. You're wondering why we're using gas tax for that particular project opposed to using the sewer infrastructure? Is that what I'm?
Yeah, just for info. I know it's not my area. I just
sure.
For information. Yeah.
No. So there's certain projects that were brought forward to council in prior years to use some of the gas tax, and that was one of them. And also we've allocated a substantial amount of the sewer water infrastructure over the next couple of years for the other capital projects, including the Shubenacadie sewer wastewater treatment plant and the other projects that you saw in here. So we always try to use whatever reserves we have in an appropriate manner, but that was one that councillors saw probably. It's a project from 2016, and there was a report that was brought forward I think 3 years ago, to discuss the various uses of the gas tax. And there was a large list that councillors met, and we went over that, I think in 2019, and that was one of them that we might have considered at the time.
I remember now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions for the Director of Finance? Councillor Tingley.
I just have a question through the chair for my own interest as well. Seems to be a lot of healthy reserves there, which is a great thing. When you take money out of these various reserves, how do you plan to replace it? Like, is it planned over a certain amount of years, or like, how do you replenish these reserves?
Sure. So it varies from reserve to reserve. For instance, the sewer and water infrastructure, we collect those as the developers begin developing. So that's on an ongoing basis. Every time a new developer hooks in or is hooking in, we receive those funds. There's also gas tax, which I keep forgetting the new name, BBCF, fund that we receive from the federal government annually, and it's just over $1 million. And that agreement is a 10-year agreement, which is not expiring until 2024. So we know each year that we're going to be receiving approximately $1 million. And last year we actually received a top up of an additional $1 million gas tax, a special payment. So we had that went into our reserve. And 2 years ago, we had a top up like that from the federal government. So those are, some of the ways. We also put aside in our budget, which you'll have seen or can see in the budget document, we put aside reserves, especially in operating each year, so that we continue to build those reserves. And we also, for instance, with the the Waste Management Center, there's healthy reserves there because there's a plan that we put amounts in there every year to make sure that any equipment or work that needs to be done out there, there's reserves there to do that. Does that help?
It does, thanks.
Sure.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Next up, Deputy Warden Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Sue. Item page 49, the organic transfer station repairs. Will that, as the repairs are being done, will that affect the capacity at the transfer station in any way?
I will. Is Jesse on the call? I don't see him.
He is.
Just out of curiosity,
oh, there he is.
That's all.
Jesse can probably answer that.
Through Chair, we're not anticipating any operational delays or challenges. What we'll do is, for a short period of time, we'll store organics outside. It's not ideal. It creates more weight, but in a short term, it's not going to impact things too negatively. It won't interrupt our service delivery for our residents, which is the key aspect. We'll have some issues in the background to manage, but our residents won't have any delays, or we won't need to divert anything other than to our compost transfer or our organics processing facility.
Okay, and while I have you, Jesse, page 56, the replacement of the Milford Storage Building, is that on land that we own, or?
Sure.
Close proximity to each other?
Through you, Chair, the initial 50,000 is to assess the existing storage building. It's the old Milford office where we had the wastewater treatment plant, and so it's an existing municipal property with municipal facilities. We've got 2 new buildings on the site in behind it, and it's well aged and we need more space. And the big driver for space requirements is actually linked to the Enfield water treatment plant. We leverage where the third tank is going to be installed for storage for many different operations. And we are going to be leveraging that big chunk of space. And so now we're going to be in a space crunch. So our building's already in rough shape, and we're trying to rejuggle our inventory areas. And so that's what that big focus is for Milford, to say, how can we use this space the most effectively and efficiently?
Okay, good news. Thanks. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Anybody else have any questions? Seeing no further questions, I believe that's the end of your report, is it not, Sue?
There's a motion, but I'm just going to bring it up, but I certainly appreciate if it's too soon for councillors to consider, but it's a very large motion. And it's also included in the capital project at the beginning of the document. But I certainly can answer any more questions, or we can bring this back at the next either budget meeting or at executive committee next week.
So councillors, what is your will? Would you like to take this back and digest it, look at it during executive, and give you some extra time to go through those projects now that some of us might have a better understanding of how those look on the page and what those numbers mean? Or is somebody prepared to move the motion now? What is your will? Deputy Warden Mitchell.
I'd like to have more time to digest what Sue went through, and also, to the fairness of the two councillors that aren't here, to give them an opportunity to look through the pages as also. That's just my suggestion, and bring it back later.
All right.
Absolutely. I just
anybody. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sue.
No, I just had it there just in case anybody wanted it brought forward, but that makes sense.
So is the rest of council, or council and committee in agreement with bringing this back to executive and discussing the motion there and moving? Anybody have any issues with that? All right. Seeing there's no opposition to it, on the recommendation of the deputy warden, we will move this to be brought back to executive council to be looked at again, giving our colleagues and the rest of us all time to go through the projects and have any other questions raised. Seeing that is the end of tonight, as far as the budget is concerned for tonight's meeting. Go ahead, Sue.
So I see CAO is looking to speak. We just have a couple other things that we were hoping to bring forward before we closed.
Okay, CAO.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. So council has seen the business plans. They've seen an analysis of your tax rates and the assessment data and whatnot. At this point, we really don't have any other information for the 2022-2023 budget to present to council. I know there has been some discussion amongst yourselves during the last few meetings, whether you want to try and bring some money in from reserves for RCMP costs or whatnot, to try and get your tax rate back down to that 85 cents instead of the 0.7 cent increase. So I guess we would look for some direction from council on where we go next. We have the sort of the setting of the tax rate and looking for some guidance there. The HR report will be posted later this week. We usually don't present that to committee unless it's a new council, just to go through the general overview of HR. But I can certainly give you the high level discussion around the HR report this evening in about 3 minutes. And then we have the water utility budget to present. The water utility budget isn't really have to be part of this process. It can be separate, but it will be ready probably Thursday, Friday this week. So we could easily post it for committee next Tuesday, or we could even do it in March. The one thing from the water utility, if you'll remember last meeting when I was finishing up the business plan presentation, I noted that there was a position included for water wastewater. That position, the reason it wasn't on your slide deck is because it's actually all water, and I had forgotten that detail. So there is a position in the water utility budget for an additional operator. We have some succession planning and just some general resource needs for water as we grow in the corridor community. So if council wants to look at that budget on Tuesday, I would look to get that position advertised as quickly as possible because it's an absolute necessity for our operations. Or even if council is okay with me proceeding with an advertisement and then knowing that, you know, you haven't passed your budget yet, but we would look to get that out in the paper earlier than later. So those are sort of the three things we have left to do. If council wishes, I can take you through sort of the general thoughts of the HR report. So when you see it next week or at the end of the week posted, you can help you digest it. And then we can talk about the other two remaining items, if that works for council.
All right, council, you've heard the thoughts of the CAO.
I'm good with it.
You're good with, okay, Deputy Warden. Anybody else have any comments? Warden, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm fine with it would be kind of good to have the quick overview of the HR report leading into that being published. Regarding the possibility of lowering the tax rate, I guess that's a discussion that we will have to have at some point before we make the motion to set the tax rate. I don't know if we need to have an entirely separate meeting for that, or would there be time on the executive agenda to have that?
Through you, Madam Warden, I think if council indicates to us this evening that that is your intention, then we can go back and figure out how to make that work, make some recommendations to bring to committee on Tuesday. I think I don't really want to be trying to do it on the fly on Tuesday. I'd much prefer to prepare that information for committee to consider.
Well, personally, I'm just still thinking about it. But if we could have perhaps, I know that some councillors would probably like to see a scenario of what it would look like and how much we would have to bring in from what reserve to do that. So if that information is easily available, if we could have that and then make a decision from based on that, I think that would be the prudent way to proceed.
Okay. We can certainly do that. And other than that, there's also the fire departments. I know we've heard from Mount Uniac Fire. Provided the rest of you have no more information from your fire departments, those rates as presented would be brought forward to committee to be set this month. And I don't think there's anything else other than those few things. So unless you have questions or if you want more financial analysis done of something in the budget, if you do, that would be great to find out now, and we could prepare that for the next budget meeting.
Being a longtime councillor here and remembering budget discussions of 20+ years ago, I am shocked that we are not spending at least 2 entire budget meetings debating that new bucket for the loader at the landfill. I don't.
We have matured.
I had to smile when I saw that because I do remember a time when we would have debated that, probably at least 1 entire meeting and possibly 2. So anyway, and I'm jesting. I don't really want to discuss it for 2 meetings.
One point that I have here just before you speak, Sue, is I know definitely we're going to want a scenario brought forward with how we can keep the tax rate, I would imagine, at the same, and the options from where these reserves or these pots of money are coming from. I do know in the past we've used deed transfer tax to pay for certain things, and I do know if that's one of the pots of money that are being brought forward, we're going to need to also see the breakdown of that tax income by district, so we understand. As we know, in years past, there was a portion there that was we had to rejig things at the end of last budget to make it fair and equitable. So we want to ensure we do the same thing this year as with every year we do budget. The Director of Finance and then Councillor Garden-Cole. Go ahead, Sue.
Thank you, through the chair. I was just looking for like direction on what you would like us to bring back. So if it's just you'd like us to keep it at the same general tax rate as last year, then we can bring that, and then sources of how reserves.
Okay,
Or
Council.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. Councillor Garden Cole and then Councillor Tingley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, being relatively new and this only being my second budget, I would definitely appreciate those scenarios and what it would look like to keep the tax rate the same, and how that would affect down the line, and what has been discussed here by Warden Ralston and Councillor Perry as well, just for especially for definitely for my own benefit and probably for others as well. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Tingley.
Through the chair, I think Councillor Garden Cole took my comments as well. I'd be interested to see what the projections are into the future if we do take out reserves, reserve money, what impact it would have later on. Like, would we be just taking reserves now to lower the tax now and have to increase it, next year or the following years type of thing?
Through the chair. So that is certainly a concern that you have to consider. I do know that we do have a surplus in the deed transfer tax this year, that if council wanted to hold the tax rate, that is an option to bring forward for sure. But Kim did, our CAO did outline that it is just prolonging having to have that increase in the tax rate. However, we do have a substantial amount of development happening right now, and we expect to see a fair amount of assessment growth that will also help with stabilizing the general tax rate as well.
So hearing that and speaking for myself, and I would imagine other councillors, I think that's the two areas you need to focus on, is the options of funding sources of what can maintain the rate, what the effect of maintaining the rate is, and what's the possible projection based on the current development, whether it's building permits or whatever, through discussion with the planning department of how that will impact going forward. Because as we've seen during the presentation already, how we've kept healthy reserves and kept our rate at the same, roughly within the same plane, has been through diligent planning, and I know that we want to continue that, so there is no spikes, and people can expect to see a good rate moving forward. As we all know, inflation has hit everything else. Warden Ralston.
Let's just add to that. And we all understand that folks are going to see an increase this year, even if the tax rate is held, because of the 5.4% increase under the CAP program. So we do, I believe, have to be careful. It's great if we can mitigate it this year. We don't know what the assessment increase might be next year. And if we can hold the line safely this year, I'm all for it. But if we're holding the line on 0.7 of a cent this year, only to have to turn around and increase it by 2, 3, 4, or 5 cents next year, I don't think that would be wise. It's get out your crystal ball, I guess, and make the best. Thank you.
And Warden Ralston, you brought up a good point. Like, the average home went up through the consumer price index of 5.4%. You hear a lot of talk about 11.2% increase in assessment in the municipality. But as was outlined by the CEO in her CAP presentation, there's a large portion of the homes that it's only a 5.4% increase, actually, what has happened. I believe I saw a hand. Was it Councillor Musa? Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. And to me, I don't know if other councillors feel the same. I think the province played big games on us this year, raising the cap 5.4 and increasing the policing by $900,000. So I think that they played that game right, and I hope they don't play it again. I think we should send them a letter, tell them to slow down a little bit.
We already have.
Yeah, we have, and it was the we have to remember, it wasn't the province. The federal government was the one that negotiates the RCMP contract, and the consumer price index is set in legislation. So it wasn't the provincial government
my
that
bad.
decided this. It was beyond their control. So yes, but we definitely did send a letter to the Justice Department about the increased costs and how it's affected us from the decision of the RCMP raise. Is there any other questions for anybody else? Director of Finance, is that enough information for you and CAO moving forward to our next meeting? Okay, see anybody's in agreement. And looks like we've ended an hour early tonight. Oh, go ahead, CAO.
Did you want some HR information for when the
HR
report
Yes.
is posted?
Correct, yes.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I don't actually have the draft of the HR report in front of me, but when you get that report, you're generally going to see a report on the demographics of our staff. And then some employment trends of what we're seeing in the market, looking at our various positions, which ones are, difficult to fill and less difficult to fill in the market. I would state for this year that most of them are difficult to fill in the market. We're seeing positions where we put a position out to advertisement and we might get 3 resumes come through the door. So an unbelievably challenging time to try and recruit during the pandemic. We've had some wonderful recruits of the last 6 months that have come and joined us on staff. A difficult time to join on staff for sure, but really great folks, many of whom have moved home back to Nova Scotia from out of province. So we're very fortunate in that respect. The report's also going to talk about retirement and succession planning. And as you know, we have a large portion of our staff who are coming up on their retirements. And one of your strategic plan objectives is to deal with that head on and make sure that we're doing appropriate succession planning and appropriate retention of our staff. So part of that is through training and development, through more flexible working policies, working through things like the pandemic with fair and consistent practices. Things like that are going to help you maintain and retain the staff that you do have. We're going to be losing enough folks through retirement in the next few years. We don't need to lose any more. So it'll talk a little bit about the key positions that we need to fill in the next few years. And then there's the financial section. And I talked a little bit about the finances around human resources last week. So we talked about there's a few different components, and there's a table in the report that you'll get basically that looks at your full-time staffing positions. One of the key components of your budget that allows you to stay up to date. There's 2 key components that allow you to stay up to date with salaries. One we were falling behind on, and I mentioned last week we had increased that. So what we call the market provision, we do a market review every year of our salaries against the broader market being municipal salaries. But in some of the positions that we have to compare against industry salaries as well, because some of those positions are easily interchanged with professionals from different industries. So that was and has been set at $100,000 a year for many, many, many years. And as I've talked to council before, that was falling behind. So this budget includes $150,000 for those market provisions this year. And as I mentioned to council last year, we did an extensive market review. We looked at, it took us a large amount of time to do the review. We took our time. We did some extensive research in the market, and we reallocated some of our dollars throughout the organization, filled some of our positions that had been vacant. So all of that was done last year. What that enabled us to do at the same time, we realized most of our salary scales were behind. So we changed the scale to what the market says it should be. But we didn't necessarily put the person, if they were at their top of their scale before, didn't go to the top of the new scale. So this budget, what you're going to see, normally you have a line in your budget in each department for salary increments and adjustments. So those are performance-based increments that we go through a 6-step scale with our employees as they work their career here. What you'll see is last year that probably would have been $80,000 to $90,000, and that would have been consistent. But where a lot of people, we probably had 60% of our staff at the top of their scale. Now they're not at the top of their scale. So in this budget, you see more of those folks being able to move up a step, which increases that budget for those salary scales and adjustments. And you would have seen those throughout the document as outlined. And the other number in that table is the reorganization or new positions. So council has actually seen most of these. The one in the full-time is the building inspector, which you've approved, and we are out to market now, actually, have done the interviews for that position. And in this budget, there's also, you'll see in the water utility, the new operator for the water side of the utility. And of course, that is a necessary position to meet the demand of the water utility. As you grow your customers by the hundreds every year, so does the demand on those key positions. And the water utility, with the new expansion of the water treatment plant in Enfield and the distribution system expanding, there is a position here for a new full-time operator. And again, we have a lot of retirements coming up in the water wastewater area. Those folks tend to not work interchangeably all the time, but are cross-trained in both water and wastewater. So over the next few years, as retirements happen, that position will help with that succession. There is another position in the planning department. You have a part-time planner, or not a part-time planner, a project planner to get you through the plan review. That position isn't included in your salary table in your HR report, but it is a resource that we have in-house right now. And other than that, in your human resource section of your budgets, we have a tremendous increase in our, and so you can correct me if I'm wrong here, CPP, EI, and workers' compensation. I think we did the math, and it's about $700 an employee as an increase to those rates this coming year. So we're not the only ones feeling that, of course. That will be felt across all the industries that have to pay those rates. But when you take $700 per employee and multiply it by 60 or 70 employees, it certainly adds up fairly quickly. So some of those HR budgets are being driven by that increase in those mandatory rates, and we can't help that. So that really is we've tried the best we can to keep our human resource costs at a minimum. But if we run the organization the way we need to and respond to the growth and the demands of council that we have, we definitely need to be putting more money into human resources over the next few years. And we'll be coming back to council with those recommendations, as we have been doing over the fall, when things get to a point where we need more people and to meet those demands. And I'm always trying to work within the dollars that council gives me to manage human resources here. So you'll see there's some notes in the document about monies being moved from part-time to full-time and whatnot. Those are things, as we change our needs and as council services change, we also change. So we're not the type of organization who says, well, we've always had 4 operators, and even if you lose half your system, we still need 4 operators. We will adapt, and we're constantly doing that. You've seen that in some of our services over the years, where we've gone from a full-time person to a half-time person and then reallocated those dollars somewhere else in the organization. So we are often looking at that, and you'll see that represented throughout the past business plans and throughout your HR reports. But it is important, and I've had this conversation with council many times, that we continue to invest in our human resources, because we really do need to have the best people here to get the job done that we've set out to do. And you have a very aggressive and hopeful strategic plan. I was doing the list today of all the different initiatives and pulling them together for discussion next week. And there are hundreds of really important projects that need to be done in the next 3 or 4 years. So our human resources and make sure we are adequately staffed certainly play a big part of that. So as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Chairman, if we could, I don't know council's comfort level with us going out to market for the wastewater or for the water operator now instead of waiting. I mean, you don't have to fill the position if you decide at some point not to pass this budget the way it is. You certainly don't have to fill the position, but we'd like to get a step into the market sooner than later. So I'd be looking for some direction on that. And it doesn't have to be a motion. I would just take direction from committee.
Well, I think, with the job market the way it is, we do need to plan proactively, not reactively, and that this water position is going to be essential moving forward. And I don't think it will be the last one we're going to need in the upcoming years to move forward as well. We've had discussions in the past with HR about being prepared and not being behind, and seeing how the job market is. I'll put it out there to the rest of council to see if anybody else would disagree that should be moved forward. First off, Councillor Tingley, then the Deputy Warden.
Very simple. I would just agree with you, Councillor Perry. We should be looking to see what's out there now to hire for that position.
Deputy Warden.
I agree. Let's get out early. The competition will be stiff, so I agree. Let's get at it.
All right, just by a show of hands, who would agree to have that position move forward? Raise your hands. There you go, CAO.
Okay,
unanimous support for that. Warden Rolson, you had your hand up there just beforehand. Oh, you're good. All right. I do have one question for you, CAO, in relation to HR. Is there plans as we transition? I won't say come out of COVID, but as we transition through this most recent COVID period, moving towards, fingers crossed, hopefully coming out of this pandemic and resuming whatever the new lifestyle will be post-pandemic, looking at an employee type of survey to find out how they're feeling, how they're doing, and coming back. Because I think, I know for myself, I don't know, probably other councillors too, we want to make sure that our staff are coming through the other side of this best they can, and if they need anything or any supports that we know, so we can leverage them if need be from the council side.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, when I became CAO in September 2019, that was one of the first things we started upon, was to draft an employee satisfaction survey. We had it almost ready in February of 2020, and then we jumped right into a pandemic. So it is something that we're contracting out because I think you get your best results and best information if you're not having your own HR people take feedback from your staff. So I didn't want to put it out there during the pandemic. We've been in such flux, but we do have it ready to go, and I do plan on putting it out probably sometime late February, early March. And it is a full-scale employee satisfaction survey. Yep.
Excellent, thank you. All right, seeing the HR prep for the report to be posted later this week, is there any questions for the CAO? Seeing none, I guess now I can finally say that we've reached the end of tonight's schedule. Third time's the charm. So I'll be looking for a motion to adjourn, and I believe we do not need the meeting on Thursday night.
Right.
We will be reconvening at executive committee next Tuesday.
Right.
So if somebody would like to make that motion, is that moved by moved by the warden, seconded by Councillor Knockwood? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned.